this is good. We are live. Okay, share it with the page. All right, we've got all right, we've got people joining us now. Thank you guys for joining us. As it's already almost 10 o'clock in Sydney where our guest is, so I suppose we'll jump straight into the show. First of all, thank you so much for joining me live on Facebook. We are on Facebook and Twitter and of course YouTube. So if you are just joining us, thank you so much for joining us. Share and start your own watch party. Without further ado, I'd like to invite and introduce our next guest today. Our guest today is none other than Mark Bosnich, former Manchester United goalkeeper. Hi Mark, how are you?
Good, thanks, Sasi. How are you? And I hope you're well and your family's well. Everybody in Singapore as well.
Yeah, no, everyone's great, mate. Thanks for taking time. I know it's late at night. Your kids are sleeping. We'll try and we'll smash through this one. If you're just joining us, make sure that you join in on the conversation. Ask Mark as many questions as possible. He's really good sport. He doesn't hold anything back. The last time we spoke, Mark, you were on my radio show. Well received, I must say. Overwhelming response to that one. People really enjoyed it. Well, what people really enjoyed about was your candidness. Like, you're so candid about your life. You didn't hold anything back. Even your failures and stuff like that. You actually, you walk through that. You talk to us about that. And why? Before we get into the show, why is that you're so candid as someone else would be not so candid about such things?
I don't really know why. I guess it's just my character. That's all. I'm comfortable in myself. And also obviously comfortable in speaking about things that have occurred, and I've spoken about them a lot of times. That isn't the first time I spoke with you. So I guess it's just my nature. That's all. That's all it is.
Right. Just before we get into your life and career, what are you up to these days? I know you do a lot of media work and stuff. So tell our audience what you've been up to.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to turn the volume up a little bit. That's why my hand was up there.
Yeah.
I've been back in Australia for about 12 years now, and worked for Fox Sports Australia, and we did a local league which is called the A League, and we also had the Premier League up until about 3 years ago. So I've been doing that and a whole host of other media stuff, whether it be appearances or public speaking, or sometimes they get to write an article for the newspaper. But that's really been what I've been doing, and bringing up, as we spoke before we got on air, and bringing up 2 children with my fiancée Sarah. So that keeps me pretty busy, to be honest. And I have been very busy even during this lockdown period, just trying to keep football prominent over here, because it's not number one sport over here in Australia. It's the number one played sport, but it's not the number one most popular sport. So every type of media and exposure that anything from the world game can get over here is a real bonus.
Let's talk about your early childhood in Australia. You actually grew up in a town called Liverpool, which is not too far from Sydney, right?
Correct. Yes, correct. Liverpool's I'd say about 35 kilometres southwest of Sydney, and some great memories for me. I told you last time when we spoke, I had a really lucky childhood, very loving parents, a wonderful sister, and life was really good. You have to say, you don't realize until you go to England for 20 years how lucky you are with the weather over here as well. And things were very, very simple, and I really enjoyed them. Played a lot of sport, done the very best that you could do at school, and it was really good.
Your first sport, I would say, it was rugby league or rugby union in Australia, which your mom didn't really want you to play. That was a specific reason, right?
Yeah, look, rugby league it was. I mean, to be fair, the school I went to was a rugby union school. So those who don't know, rugby league and rugby union are very similar games. They're not the same, but they're very similar games. One is played by 15, which is rugby union. The other one is played by 13, with rugby league. And I used to play both. I really liked that. I was quite big for my age, so it really suited me as well. But I've got a real belief, and a lot of people actually have data, as they call it these days, or evidence, or whatever you want to call it, to back up that I do believe when somebody's young, the more sports that he or she plays, it does enhance your overall athletic ability, and I think that's an important thing, especially while you're young. You can always have your number one sport, no doubt about that, whether it be football, whether it be whatever it is, cricket, rugby league, rugby union, whatever sport that may be. But the more variety of sports that you do, I truly believe that it enhances your athletic ability.
You started your youth career at Sydney, Croatia. Back then, football in Australia was very ethnic based, wasn't it?
Well, yes, I guess so. I mean, football's been going here in Australia for a very long time. Over 100 years. So before, there was a lot of migrants that came to Australia at the end of the Second World War, from various parts of the world, but predominantly from Southern Europe, and a lot of those people who come to this country, quite naturally formed their own social clubs where they could meet and talk to each other about their life in a new land, and have the ability to speak their own language and so forth, and just to feel that community spirit and togetherness. And of course, the byproduct of that is that the majority of those countries those people come from were footballing nations, and they started off their own clubs. But you also had the Australians here, like I said, who've been playing football for a very long time, and also there was not only immigrants that came from Southern Europe and other places, but from Britain and that as well. So it made for a very good mix, a very multicultural mix, if you like, in terms of the sport. And those days, in Australia is such a big place. Australia is a continent in itself. And there was, especially at the beginning, there was no air travel to other states or that. So the leagues were basically state-based. And they served their purpose for a very long time. They've done a very good job, to be fair. A lot of people, I think, don't give them as much credit in terms of the job they did, because they were all part-time and trying to manage, having that with, adjusting to a new life in a new country, with a new culture, a new language for a lot of people. So it provided a real pathway for those who wanted to partake in soccer or football, whatever you want to call it. It was inevitable. It had to go, it had to become localized, if you like. And then obviously with air travel and that. And when I say localized, I mean, it was inevitable that, teams were not going to be called, for example, maybe Sydney, Croatia, maybe they're going to be called Sydney FC or Western Sydney. And that was just the evolution of the game. But those early years and what those people and what those clubs meant to those people, and to football in general, will never be forgotten, not from my point of view anyway. And I think it's important that you don't forget your history as you go towards the future.
Hey Mark, I'm really interested to know, how did you end up being a goalkeeper? Not many kids want to say that
Oh,
they want to go in between posts, right? Not many.
yeah.
Everyone wants to be scoring goals. How did you get there?
Quite simple, because I wasn't good enough outfield.
Was that the real reason, or?
I think as well, the predominance of hand sports over here in Australia. So I played a lot of cricket in the summer months, because back then, football was a winter sport. It changed about 30 years ago to become a summer sport. I played a lot of cricket. I played, like I just said to you, a lot of rugby league, rugby union. So it playing with, using your hands in different sports, it come a lot more natural to me. But especially if you speak to my father, he'll turn around and basically say he started off up front and went all the way back because he wasn't good enough until he went to goalkeeper.
No, I suppose every dad wants the son to score goals first, right? The goal scorers get all the money. But let's talk about your move to England, because you were on a family holiday in
Yeah.
Croatia, and someone that this part of the world, especially in Singapore, know really well, Alan West. He coached in
Yes.
Geylang. He played a huge role in your move to England, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Very, very fortunate to meet someone like Alan Best, who used to get in New South Wales, the state that we live in here in Australia, which is it's not the biggest state area-wise, but it is in terms of population. Used to get the best boys together from all age groups pretty much every school holidays. And he was aware that we're going on a family holiday. And at the end of that holiday, he arranged through a friend of his called Malcolm Cook, who was a youth team manager at Liverpool, for me to do 3 days at Liverpool. And I was just very, very lucky that those 3 days, everything I touched sort of turned to gold. I was just very, very fortunate. And Kenny Dalglish, who was manager at the time, just turned around and said, would you be interested in staying? I wanted to finish off school. My father wanted me to finish off school here in Australia. So I said that if I did do that, I would come back at the start of the following year, which would have been the start of the 88-89 season, because at the time where I went for a trial was around about September 1987.
And of course, it was not meant to be for you to sign for Liverpool, because Sir Alex Ferguson and his team hijacked you as as a young kid, right? Because you were that good. And tell us about that, because things could have been different if you had gone to Liverpool, but you decided and you opted to go to Manchester United, of course.
Yeah, there was a late, he's passed away now, so bless his soul, coach of Australia, and he coached locally here, called Eddie Thompson, who knew Sir Alex from his time in Scotland. And he'd obviously heard about it and was on the phone. And Sir Alex, I think around about, it was around March 1988, said to come over for a trial, which I did do for 2 weeks, I think it was, and basically said that you're going to sign here, we'll be able to get your work permit, blah blah blah. So I did. So then in July 1988, from sunny, as I said to you before, from sunny Sydney, I went to sunny Salford in Manchester. Well, it was sunny at the time because it was summer in the UK. But as the months sort of got towards August, September, October, I could realise that it was going to get quite cold. But I was very, very lucky. Like I said to you on the last interview that I did for you, just very, very lucky to be in the right place at the right time, and to have somebody believe in me to give me that opportunity. It was absolutely fantastic and a wonderful experience. To be there at Manchester United, especially at that time as well, where they were not the club that they were today. They were in terms of their bigness and where they had been, but they were just going through a period where Liverpool, who we just spoke about, had been dominant for nearly 20 years, and so Alex had just arrived, and he wanted to strive to get towards that. So it was an exciting time. You could sense what was where the place was going.
I want to find out, when you got to Manchester United, who was the first player you got close to, the first person that you actually met and shook hands and say he became your friend, of someone you can call a friend?
Oh, all of them.
Really?
All of
Okay.
them. There's no one that really sticks out. All of them, from the boys that are at my digs, and for those who don't know what digs are, that they're usually at a place close to the old training ground where it was the Cliff, where originally I had a lady called Mrs. Donnelly, who lived in a very big house on her own, but about 4 or 5 of us stayed there, and obviously the club made sure that that we were okay in terms of meals and so forth. They took care of everything like that, and so all of them. There's not one that I don't not think of, and like I said to you, those are special times and special memories that you always keep with you, and especially being so young, there was always something different and something happening, and like I said to you, I was just very, very lucky to have that experience. You asked at the beginning of the show about candidness and all that, and being part of my nature. I think a lot of that nature it began here in Australia with your family and friends, but a lot of it was developed during those crucial years, so to speak, between 16 and 20, and 3 of those years from 16 to 19 was spent in Salford and Manchester. I'll never forget all the people, how nice and how kind they were to me, and the opportunity they gave me, like I said to you, to play football, to do what I truly love.
It was a strange twist of fate because you had to come back. You came back to Australia after 3 seasons there. What happened? Work permit.
I couldn't get a work permit to stay in the country, unfortunately. So that was a shame. So I had to come back to Australia for 6 months. Around about it was around about, I think, from about August 1991 to about January, February 1992. And in that interim period, the work permit didn't become a problem anymore. I was very, very fortunate because I'd married my childhood sweetheart, so the work permit wasn't a problem. And in January, February, I went back to England, but this time back to Aston Villa, Birmingham, which, again, another place that was very, very kind to me and had a fantastic time with Aston Villa. I was very, very lucky.
Who was your manager at Aston Villa at that time?
Ron Atkinson, who was the previous manager to Manchester United. And he really, like you said, threw me in at the deep end, so to speak, and really, Sir Alex gave me our original opportunity in English football, but he really gave me our real opportunity in first team football. And it was a wonderful experience at the time because there were so many good young players, good experienced players, a really good mix. So the first season of the Premier League, we finished second to Manchester United. And then that second season, we had that wonderful run in the League Cup where we won the League Cup. And that was absolutely fantastic experience, especially for somebody so young like myself. And also, playing in Europe, and playing with some of those players that, that used to watch week in, week out here in Australia, listening to the stories, listening to what they did, looked at how they prepared, and that it was like I said, it was just a very, very fortunate experience. I feel blessed, and that will keep coming up throughout the story, but I truly do.
Mark, I want to ask you, because how hard was it for you as a Aussie trying to make your name in England? Because obviously probably at that point in time, Australia wasn't a powerhouse like now it is, or it became over the years. Was it hard for you to deal with such things?
Well, for me personally, no. Like I said, I thought everybody that I come across in the footballing world, anyway, always accepted me, for the number one, for the person that I was, and then number two, for my ability on the park. But everywhere I went around the UK, at that time, and this is just my personal experience, I never had a problem with anyone really. And if I did have any type of problem with anyone, it generally I can't even remember anyone having a problem within the footballing world. It may have been outside of that, but that's just that's just what goes on. But no, I was accepted. Like I said to you, number one as a person, and number two as a goalkeeper.
Someone just sent a message. Des Corkill, he said, Mark started his media career when at Villa. I drove up to their training ground to get him to pre-record links for Football Mundial. I don't know if you remember that one. Des Corkill,
No.
yeah, so he's someone that actually commentates a lot on Asian football, this part of the world. Obviously, he remembers that. Tell us a little bit about the challenges you faced in that.
Your voice, when you're talking about that gentleman, your voice is starting to crackle a little bit, just to let you know, that's all.
Yeah, that's all right. So I'll just get a little bit closer to the mic. I want to ask you, the best moments you had at Aston Villa. What were the best moments you had at Aston Villa? Obviously, you guys did really well as a club. Personally, what was your highlight there?
There were several highlights, but I always hark back to the reason really why you start playing the game, which is to win trophies, and that was sort of drummed into us, or drummed into me anyway, as a young player at Manchester United by the late Eric Harrison, who was a youth team manager. So winning that first trophy at Wembley was very, very special, and then repeating it 2 years later against Leeds United. Those are the two things that stick out. Obviously, the inaugural season of the Premier League, coming second. A lot of people sort of probably just overlooked that, obviously, because we didn't win. Exactly. And that teaches you something in itself. But really, like I said, if you really want to look at highlights, it had to be those 2 seasons where we won the trophy. First time with Ron Atkinson, the second time with Brian Little, with a different side, not a completely different side, but a different side. So those two things, because there's nothing better for me than walking around the pitch with a trophy in your hand, whether it be the Premier League trophy or like I said, the League Cups or that World Club Cup. That those moments are things that you put all the hard hours in, all the work, and make all the sacrifices for.
When you look at all the clubs you actually played for, you spent the longest time in Aston Villa from 92 to
Yeah.
99. Do you think, when you look at your career as a whole, that was the place that you truly found or played really
Mm.
good football?
Oh, not really. I was fortunate to have a great period during that time. There's no doubt about that. But everywhere I played, like I said, you know, I was very, very lucky to have played during that time. That's how I see it. And there wasn't a place I played, even at the end at Chelsea, where I didn't play too much, but where there wasn't times when I realized, I thought to myself, well, you really are in terrific form at this moment in time. Longevity always, people always turn around and say, longevity, and then you equate that more, I guess, to consistency and this, that, and the other. But like I said, I was very, very fortunate over my whole career, wherever I was, to have some really good times and memories that I can take away from me for a very, very long time.
It's during this period from 93 to 2000 where, well, 92 to 99, you actually called up for Australia. You did play with under 20s, under 23s, but the senior debut, you made it in 1993, I believe. Do you still remember your senior debut for Australia?
Yeah, you crackled up a bit there. I think you said, do I remember my
Your debut, the debut for Australia,
debut
yeah.
for Australia?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, yes, yeah. Of course I do. It was in a World Cup qualifying game against New Zealand, and again it was the late Eddie Thompson who had called me in very, very late to the camp, and New Zealand had proved to be a bit of an obstacle in the past for Australia, and I think the first game may have been. I think it was either Auckland or Wellington, and we ended up winning 1-0, and then we won the replay the second leg a couple of weeks ago, then to put us into the other playoffs. But you always remember playing for your country. It was a shame for me because at that time it was very difficult because there was no international breaks at that time. Like there wasn't uniform international breaks, so international appearances for me were few and far between. But it's always a special moment to play for your country. There's no doubt about that.
I want to talk about, because you played 17 games for Australia,
Mm.
was part of the 17 caps. Did you play in that match in the MCG when Australia played Iran in the World Cup qualifiers? You were just one step away.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that was disappointing, obviously, especially for the fans of Australia, because they hadn't qualified for the World Cup for so long. It felt terrible for the fans of Australia. But I think a lot of people, when they talk about it, they always look at this or they look at that, or they say the guy who parachuted in during the game,
Yeah.
or that. I think it gets overlooked of what a great job Iran did. They were unlucky in the first leg. We drew 1-1, but they were on the ascendancy for quite some time. Although the second leg, there's no doubt that we had chances to put the game away well before we went up 2-0. But they showed great character, and I'll never forget the character they showed to come back, because lesser team, and lesser men on any team would have just sort of said, "Oh, this is it. It's over. Away from home in front of 90,000 people. We're 2-0 down. We could be 6-0 down." And they found something at that moment. They found something, and I think you have to give them a lot of credit. As disappointing as it was, I think it's always important, that you try your hardest to lose with as much dignity as you possibly can. And like I said, even though it was highly disappointing for Australia, for myself, but especially for the fans, you have to hold your hands up to Iran and say well done for what they did.
Yeah, it's strange because I had teammates from both ends. From Australia, I played with Ernie Tapai at Home United
Yeah,
here.
you said that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I also played with Hamid Reza Esteli and Mohammad Kakfur for Iran. They were my teammates just before they went
yeah.
to the World Cup, and Hamid actually scored against USA. That was great. So yeah,
Mm.
and we always talk about that. And one of the things that talking to Ernie Tapai on that one, he said that a lot of the players couldn't pick themselves up, knowing that that was probably the closest Australia will get to the World Cup
Mm.
at that point in time. Do you agree with that?
Well, when you say pick themselves up, I don't understand what you mean by pick
As in the
themselves up
sense that
from.
the disappointment was so huge, like, because it was within striking distance. You had everything under control, right? Like
Yeah,
you were
yeah,
in the driving
yeah,
seat.
pick themselves up as to play for Australia again, or play for their club sides,
Uh,
or
uh, uh, Football in general, because it was like, you're
oh
almost
right,
reaching the
yeah,
apex. Yeah.
yeah. Well, look, everyone's different, and there's no doubt. Like I said, it was a hammer blow, but to be really fair, literally a month or so later, we played in the Confederations Cup in Saudi Arabia and end up making the final against Brazil. So a lot of the boys, in my opinion, did pick themselves up. And like from my perspective, you have to pick yourself up, because I had a game probably about 4 or 5 days later with
Mm.
Aston Villa.
Yeah.
So that I think it's important. It's important in football as it is in life that you are going to suffer setbacks. There's no doubt about that. But you must pick yourself up as soon as you possibly can. But in terms of that Australian team, like I said to you, yeah, like I would say, I think that was in around about November. I would say literally a month later in Saudi Arabia, Confederations Cup. We got to the final. It was, even though we got absolutely walloped in the final, but it was a wonderful achievement after what occurred, to go through to the final. Beat Uruguay in the semis, I think, on golden goal. I think we had Mexico, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia in the group, and obviously got through that. It wasn't an easy group whatsoever. So I think the majority of players that I come across, obviously, like I said, it was a devastating blow, but it wasn't a blow that I ever looked upon from my perspective, especially. But even looking at some that was like, it sort of curtailed everything. Put it that way.
All right. Because let's come back to your club football. Aston Villa, after 179 games, Manchester
Mm.
United came calling. So you're going
Mm.
back to your boyhood club. How did that opportunity come about? Because obviously you showed something while you were at Aston Villa, winning
Yeah.
titles, chasing for titles. What point were Manchester United at, and who was the number one at that time, and who were they trying to replace you with?
Yeah, you cut off right at the end there,
I would say,
Sasi.
who were they trying to replace?
Oh,
By
yeah,
signing
look,
you.
the great Peter Schmeichel had been
Okay.
in goal and been absolutely fantastic. And he was coming towards the end of his tenure, and left an indelible mark not only at Manchester United but in goalkeeping in general. He was an absolute icon, you have to say, for all goalkeepers, including myself. So it was a real privilege, to be called in to come into take over after he basically called it quits at Manchester United. And again, like I said to you, I always thank the Lord all the time how lucky I am that I was able to have that opportunity, and to be back after whatever it was. I think it was about 10 years by there, close to 10 years time. The club had obviously changed, and with the success and everything, and that journey that I spoke about at the beginning had start to really go on the ascendancy. And I was, like I said, very, very fortunate to spend that time there. And, to win 2 trophies in one season is always is massive anyway. But then to do it at some place like Manchester United was even better. And I think we won the league that year by 18 points, which is only a record that's been broken. I think it was last season or the season before by Manchester City.
City, yeah.
It stood for a long time, and also become the first British team ever to win the World Club Championship against Palmeiras, the Brazilian team, in Tokyo. So, that was pretty much it. Very, very short, very, very sweet.
I want to talk about your relationship with Sir Alex Ferguson. He's famous for the hairdryer treatment. People, also you hear all sorts. Of course, you've been in the trenches. You were in the dressing room. Everybody else is guessing. Like, what do you think that made him special?
I think it was a whole lot of things. A lot of people forget as well. He had a lot of success at Aberdeen. He broke the stranglehold in Scottish football at that time that Glasgow Rangers and Glasgow Celtic had for so long, and become a real player. With a team like Aberdeen, which was an amazing achievement. Also, won the European Cup, Winners' Cup, as it was called at the time, against Real Madrid, and so he had that pedigree. And I think it was a whole lot of things which you could look at and say. Number one was the spotting of players, especially young talent. And number two, I would say, is the moulding, which is a difficult part. You do need help because you can't be, as the head manager of a football club, with those young players 24/7. You've got to have like the late Eric Harris. You've got to have somebody who's gonna sort of help do that for you. And then I think it's his willingness to give people an opportunity, regardless of who they are, how old or how young or wherever it may be. That all that coupled together obviously proved a success, and he would have adapted that as well a little bit to Manchester United, where going from say Aberdeen, where he's done that, that I would believe that would have given him a sense of not invincibility, but a sense of I can do this at Aberdeen with that limited budget and break the stranglehold of two of the biggest clubs in Britain in terms of Celtic and Rangers, then I can definitely do it given time at Manchester United, and he did. Which was arguably, like I said, one of the biggest clubs in the world in terms of their financial clout. And keep doing those things continually, day in, day out, continually to adhere to certain standards. Eventually, and that's exactly what happened. You have to say, because the first years when I was there as a youngster, it was a bit of a struggle, if people remember, and the board had faith in him. They could see what he was doing. He was on the right way, and they'll prove him correct. And then once the success came, it just come. It just come and come and come and come and come. But like I said, I think it was that's just from my perspective. It was a compilation of all those things together that molded him himself into that type of manager.
Man, I want to ask you about Sir Alex Ferguson's autobiography. We spoke about that on my radio show. He called you a terrible professional. You already explained yourself, but for people tuning in, it's quite funny when you look on hindsight, right? But why did he call you that?
I think, like I said to you, as much as I admire him and respect him for giving me my opportunity and signing me twice. In this situation, he was wrong. I really do think it was more of a sort of like a headline grab to sell books. I think he had a go at Roy Keane. There goes. I think he had a go at Owen Hargreaves. That's for North America. He had a go at a few around the world, which got him some headlines. But I think it was something to do with that he thought that he'd heard me order a takeaway or something like that. We're on the way back home from a bus or whatever. But whatever. Yeah, whatever. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. That's fine.
Have you spoken to him since?
No.
Would you?
Oh, if he walked past now, of course I would say hello to him. Of course I would.
And would you ask him why he said that?
No, that's his prerogative. Yeah.
That's a good one. And let's talk about your off the field shenanigans, shall we? Because I think that's one part of a big part of your life where you acknowledge, well, like I said at the start of the show, you formed a really close friendship with Dwight York, and you guys were sometime not enjoying life a little bit, which all should. It's really interesting because with all the stuff that's happening with Black Lives Matters and stuff like that, they actually Talksport actually did a interview with Dwight York. I don't know if you saw it, talking about how he never got an opportunity to become a manager because people call him a playboy and stuff like that. Do you think it's unfair for people to label him something like that? You know him really well. Do you think it was a very unfair, stigma that's attached to him?
Oh, definitely. There's no doubt about that. Completely unfair. Now, a lot of people will turn around and sort of, bring up sort of this or that and the other. But I was his best friend all throughout that time. Basically, we're in the UK. Pretty much, up until I came back to Australia. And like I said, a lot of people like to just, pigeonhole people in certain things and this, that, and the other. But, there was no more hardworking person that I come across. And I'm biased because I was his best friend, but I'm telling you now, no more hardworking person that I come across in my time. There may have been people who are as hardworking, but no more than Dwight York. His work ethic, and a lot of people, that's what I'm saying, even his discipline in terms of being on time and things like that. And, he wouldn't have had the career that he did. He created history. He was part of a team that created absolute history in winning the treble. You don't have careers like that unless you're hardworking, unless you're, have that type of discipline to be able to do that. I mean, a wonderful example is, how expert he became at the penalties. Now, that didn't happen overnight. He wasn't always that good. That come from practicing, between 5 and 10 penalties against me every day, nearly every day, even sometimes the day before the game. And and like I said to you, I think sometimes people just like to pigeonhole somebody for a specific thing or this, that, and the other, and that makes it easier for them, to say, okay, well, that person's there, that person's there. In terms of Dwight York, and in terms of the football side, in terms of his brain, he had a wonderful footballing brain. And I just spoke to him recently just about some football matters and all that. And I think people would be really pleasantly surprised in the way of how his football brain works. And, I always thought that, he would make a fantastic manager eventually. I always thought he'd be great to start as an assistant and then go into management. But he is the type of chap, and I've said this all along, that when he puts his mind to something, he will do it. I saw him the first ever time that he had a golf shot. We went to the Belfry Golf Course in Birmingham together. I think Brian Lara, the cricketer, his friend, was there as well. And the first golf shot he hit was like, well, okay, it wasn't great, put it that way. But literally, I would say 2 years later, his handicap was basically next to nothing.
Wow.
And that's the type of person that he is. And it really does surprise me when I hear stories. Well, I heard him talk on Talk Sport a couple of weeks back, saying how, even though he'd had recommendations from Sir Alex, that some clubs that he'd applied for the jobs that didn't even get back to him. That really surprised me.
Yeah.
Look, forget about anything else in this situation. We're just talking about somebody from a purely football perspective, who, in my opinion, will become one day a great manager if he's given the opportunity. Like I said, my always thought was I thought he'd be an assistant first, just move the way up. But, because it's been that much time since he's been given an opportunity, if I was to give him an opportunity, I'd say, right, go on, take over and show me what you can do. Because, like I said to you, there's been no more. He's as hardworking and as thorough a professional that I've ever come across in all my time.
Do you feel, slightly diverting from that question, because it's interesting to get your take on this. A lot of players, if you look at the likes of Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, they're kind of fast-tracked into management, even though they didn't have any background. When you look at someone like Dwight York, and you speak very highly of him in terms of his football brain, why do you think someone like him doesn't get this equal opportunity? Do you think it's a real problem in the game in England?
I really don't know, Sasi. I really don't know about that. And in terms of, Frank Lampard and Steven Gerrard, you're talking about two of the greatest players in the world of their whole generation. So it's completely understandable not only given the opportunity, but they're both doing well. So I keep that completely separate to somebody else. We're just talking about Dwight. And I'm not there. I haven't been back in England for 12 years, but I can only say what I know about the person. I don't know why he hasn't been given the opportunity. That's for others to turn around and to say why. Like I said to you, I listened to him on Talk Sport when he said that that two clubs had been given a recommendation by Sir Alex Ferguson about him, and they hadn't got back to him. They're the ones who can answer why. I really don't know. I just hope that, like I said, sooner rather than later, he is given the opportunity because, like I said to you, he is the type of person, if he puts his mind to something, he'll do it.
Let's talk about Sophie Anderton, because she was a big part of your life, a big part of life in many ways, right? In the sense that you did
Sasi,
say...
you're cutting off completely. I'm just hearing
right.
you in bits now.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is it better? Yeah. No? Can you hear me, Mark? You there?
You're going like.
Okay, maybe it's the internet connection. So if you can hear me, just let me know. Is it better now, or is it the same?
You're still cutting in bits.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about Sophie Anderton. Did you get that? Okay, my mic is picking you up. Let's just see. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? No? Can you hear me? Is that better? No. Can you hear me?
Must be something with the connection, Sasi.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Can you hear me? Are you on which network are you on in Australia? Oops. We lost Mark there. Let's just see if we can connect with him. Let me see if I can. Are you there, Mark? Sorry about this technology again. We're having some issues with Mark's connection, possibly because at my end is working perfectly. So let's see if can you still hear me, Mark? Because you're
Yeah,
still
in
on.
and out. You're going in and out.
Okay, yeah. Right. Okay. I'm gonna dial Mark back again. So let's see if we can connect with him. We'll give it a try. We'll give it a go. See if it works this time. Also keeping in mind that it's quite late in Sydney, Australia, where he is. Gotta respect his time. Yeah. All right. Looks like the connection is quite bad. Anyway, people, sorry about that again. I think again, it's really struggling to get connected with Mark Bosnich. Something wrong with this internet connection. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'd like to thank you for watching. I'd like to also thank our sponsors, Matchday Affairs. Please go and like their page. Visit www.matchdayaffairs.com. Watch out for these sort of programs that we bring to you every Monday evening, and hopefully you can join us. And next week's guest we will announce in the week. So if you really enjoyed so far, we've run about 40 minutes with Mark Bosnich. Thank you for joining us, and till next time, thank you for joining us.